Well, hello there, and welcome to another fantastic, wonderful episode of Bugwatch, if I do say so myself. I am your boy Swissley, and I am here to talk to you again, this time about Crusher Stampede. Due to popular demand, people asking about Crusher Stampede, it's a pretty hot topic at the moment, all those sweet WTC lists. Nice. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that and see what we think the future is for Crusher Stampede. If you like this kind of content, then please like and subscribe to the channel. Comment below. I'd love to get your opinions on what we're about to talk about. This will be part one of two parts because I want to give a bit of a review of how Crusher Stampede's run in the early weeks of Pariah Nexus. And StatCheck hasn't quite updated yet. I'm assuming they're all busy with WTC, so that's totally reasonable. But I would love to update you all on that. So I'm just going to give you my thoughts, what I've learned playing Crusher Stampede, and what I think the future holds for this detachment. So, yeah, let's turn down that music and let's get into it. Right, wonderful. So, if you'd like to see someone play Crusher Stampede, and that someone be this guy right here, me, I actually played Ed Watts. Team England's Ed Watts, maybe not for the WTC, but usually Team England's Ed Watts. And he was taking Emperor's Children, I'm taking Crusher Stampede, and it's a right old good punch up. You should go and watch it. It's on this channel, so you'll be able to go and find it in the channel. And yeah, really good game. If you don't know, we do a TT this channel this show every Friday evening. With Ed, and he plays a different opponent with a different army each time, and this one was me. I think it was like last week. So yeah, go find that and watch it because it's good fun. Alrighty. So what was wrong with Crusher? It's a big question, and it's not quite that hard to really decipher. Let's be real. What was wrong with Crusher? Well, looking at 10th edition all the way up to Pariah Nexus, it had a 37% win rate. That's not good. It had 45 players in nearly a year. Like that's how many people didn't want to play it. 9 of those though were top 25 percentile of players, which is quite interesting. And then 29% of all Crusher Stampede players achieved 3 or more wins at events. Really, I should have changed that stat to 71 did not achieve 3 or more wins. So that is telling you just how much this detachment struggles. But what, you know what I do. I like to dig. I like to find out these things about what's making it crap. Now, it's quite difficult because the reality is only 45 people played it. So why did no one play it? This is the problem. It's hard to do an analysis if there's no data, right? So the lack of games is the barrier. Why didn't people play it? Well, Invasion kind of does what Crusher Stampede does, but just better. Like, you want to take big monsters? Cool, take Crusher Stampede. And even if you do want to take just a few models to an event, you don't really take Crusher. You probably take Knights or something like that if you've got a plethora of armies available to you. So realistically, there's just things that do what Crusher wants to do, but way better. The meta itself was really aggressive. It's been a very shooty meta for the first half of 10th, which wasn't great for a detachment with no shooting defense, really. I mean, it's got toughness 10 and 11 and 12. That is a defense. And sometimes 2-up armor, also a defense. But there's no 4-up invulns. There's no strats to make it difficult. So it's pretty hard. And that results in, and we'll talk about this in a minute, the detachment getting battered in games. And then lastly but not least, an uninterested player base, really. There was no cool combos. The strats are good, and we'll talk about those in a bit, but they're not amazing. They're not amazing like the Invasion Fleet ones were. So, you can take the monsters, but actually sometimes you're like, well, these monsters are better in Synaptic, or these monsters are better in any other detachment, really, or, Crusher isn't really offering them anything. I mean, realistically, Crusher Stampede before the changes, you were just playing vanilla nids, right? Vanilla nids until your opponent deigns it upon you to hurt them, right? Like, please hurt me. I'd like to hit on 2s, please. And that's it. Like that, it's just ridiculous. But hey, it is what it is. They changed it, and now it's better. But is it good? Well, let's look at win rates. Well, not win rates, but point differentials. So, we know Crush Stampede was losing. What kind of losses were we looking at, guys? Well, what I've done here is you can see I've got 40k average. So the average 40k faction and what their how their kind of games end up. We've got Tyranids, and then we've got Crusher Stampede. So we can compare all these together, right? So we can see that Tyranids are largely in line with the 40k average, but had more than average in terms of like narrow losses, 0 to 20 point losses. And that's fine, right? That's probably what gave us our poor win rate, right? And in terms of being battered, and so what I've done is I'm going to give these names. So you've got the dark red, which is a 40 to 100 point loss. That is getting battered. A 20 to 40 point loss is the medium red, and that is a proper loss, I suppose I would call it. And then 0 to 20 is somewhat of a close loss. And then the reverse is true for the greens in terms of wins. So Tyranids are largely in line with getting battered or proper losses. They've got an over-index in slightly losing. And then in terms of wins, it's pretty much in line with total 40k. Crusher Stampede is very different. Now again, only 45 players, but the biggest over-index here is getting battered. 4 percentage points above the average Tyranid player. That's quite funny. It's funny in a make you cry kind of way, right? So you got battered a lot. And then, okay, what about proper losses? Oh yeah, I got loads of those, so a 3 percentage point over index. And then what about narrow losses? Yeah, I've got loads of those as well, a 3 percentage point over index. So then you get to, obviously, the wins we're going to under index because we're over indexing all losses, except for absolutely battering people. You can't see because of my profile picture or head or whatever you want to call it, but Crusher Stampede has a 13% of all Crusher Stampede games end in a 40 to 100 point win. If you compare that to Tyranids, it's 10%, and the total 40k average is 11, so that's a big over index of 2 to 3 percentage points. Really interesting. What is that telling me? That's telling me that we're getting, and if you look at the data from before where only, not many of the top 25% of players are playing Tyranids and playing Crusher Stampede, and some of the results we were seeing, it feels like quite a funsies list, right? A funsies detachment. People are taking it because it's a meme, it's fun. Oh, do you remember Crusher Stampede in 9th? Yeah, okay, I'll take my Harridan or my Hierodule or something else that begins with H. And I'm going to take it to this event and have a bit of a fun time. So you see that with the big losses. And then the smashing people, that really speaks to the stat check nature of the army. I've got loads of big monsters. If you can't deal with it, it's going to hurt. So that's interesting. So we'll see how that goes when we look at the top echelons of play. So I looked at the top third of players of Tyranids and the top thirds of player of Crusher Stampede. So these are like the best rated ELO players for for Tyranids and then for Crusher Stampede. So this gives us a better idea of what Crusher is capable of in the right hands, I suppose. So if you look at Tyranids and we compare it to Crusher, you can see that Tyranids overall over-index in getting battered versus Crusher. Crusher's got 6% of Crusher games end in the person getting battered, and with Tyranids overall it's 9%. So that's a 3% under-index. That's really good. That kind of tells you, oh, this is not bad. It's the narrow losses that Crusher Stampede seems to see more of. So 24%, nearly a quarter of all Crusher Stampede games end in a narrow loss. If you compare that to about 1 in 5 Tyranid games. So there's the big over-index. Not a bad place to be, right? If you are narrowly losing, and that's one of your biggest over-indexes, and then you've got the buffs coming, that's not a bad place to be. You're like, oh, if they can just push us into narrow wins, and then those narrow wins become better wins, like that is not a bad place to be. If we were just getting ruined all the time, then yeah, I'd be like, oh, well, yeah, a few buffs isn't going to do it. But actually, a few buffs might just tick this over. And then I want to bring your attention to the green boxes on the right. So we under-index in narrow wins, we under-index in proper wins, but like the previous slide, we massively over-index in battering people when it's the top third of players playing it. So it's 23%, nearly a quarter of all Crusher Stampede lists ran by the top third of Crusher Stampede players end in a big old win. That's 10 percentage points more than Tyranids. Now, you can look at the lighter green here and you can say, well, you know, the Tyraniid players over-index in the proper wins, right? In the mid-green, so to speak. So what I would suggest is add those together, right? And then you get to a world where you're like, okay, so how many Crusher Stampede wins are winning by over 20 points and how many Tyraniid players are winning by over 20 points? And actually, the Crusher Stampede just pips them by a percentage point. And that is interesting. So what we're saying is, going into all these changes and buffs, Crusher Stampede has loads of, like a lot of narrow losses, and actually can beat people quite convincingly in the right hands. Whoops. I went forward one. There we go. So, let's put our optimist hat on for a second. I want to point out that because there's been no games, 45 players, remember, it's quite hard to get statistical relevance of any one faction's matchups into with Crusher Stampede. For example, the Space Wolves one, it says here there's a 4 points differential. That's true, but there was also only 4 games played, right? So, like, you can't, or 5 games played, I think it was. So you can't really read too much into that. In all of 10th edition, up to Pariah Nexus, there was 4 or 5 games played with Space Wolves. You know, crazy. But what I have done is I've taken out the really statistically bad ones, under 5, like 1 or 2 games. At least I can point at 5 games and go, yeah, kinda. And I've ranked them in terms of what our points differentials were versus those factions. So you can see on the left-hand side, you got all the wins, all 5 of those factions, and then all the other ones are red, dark red, let's go, right? So what's quite interesting is the ones that we had a good win percent or good win differential against, again, small sample size, were Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Grey Knights, Space Wolves, right? All of those are quite common in the meta at the moment. Right? That's interesting. So I looked at the top 50%, like our best matchups, and there's a lot of narrow losses there, like we said on the last slide. And if you look at those 50% of these factions, that makes up 66% of the Pariah Nexus player base. So our best matchups, and I say best in inverted commas, right? Because we were losing a lot of these, but our best matchups are now 2/3 of the meta. Maybe not the top table meta, but all players. So if you're going to be really positive about this, you could suggest Crusher Stampede is in a good position to actually take a few heads at events. So one of the things I wanted to point out was this was all with a subpar detachment, right? I'm comparing here on this slide the stratagems of Crusher Stampede versus Invasion Fleet, and then I've also, for some flavour, chucked in Chaos Knights, because again, big models, not that many units, kind of doing a similar thing, in a sense. So what we've got the aggressive strats that Crusher had were actually quite impressive. Reroll hits in melee, that's not a bad strat. Tank shock, okay, tank shock used to be rubbish. Our tank shock used to be rubbish because everyone else's tank shock was good. Now it's been toned down a bit, everyone else's tank shock, so ours looks better in comparison. So actually, I use it in the games I play. I think it's really good. And ignore hit modifiers. One I don't use as often as I probably should, but it's a solid strat. It's fine. It'll get you out of a pinch, sometimes. So these are all, I would say, like good strats. Good, the ranger uses, happy days. You compare that to Invasion Fleet with a Hive Tyrant back in when they could do all the crazy stuff, and you could just give stuff crits on 5s. Now, if you have a unit of 10 Gene Stealers just out there critting on 5s because a Hive Tyrant's near them, that's much better than my Hive Tyrant rerolling their hits, or even a Haruspex rerolling its hits. Like you'd just rather have the crits on 5s from Gene Stealers or Tyranny Warriors, things like that. Of course, it's easier to get as well 10 Gene Stealers into combat versus a Haruspex getting into combat, as it wobbles its big old butt round a piece of terrain. Likewise, Chaos Knights have a very similar strat. So realistically, we have got these cool, good strats, but Invasion Fleet's just better. And Chaos Knights has also got like a good solution to that. Let's look at our defensive strats. Savage Roar, -1 to hit me, and maybe -1 to wound me. That's not bad. Auto Explode, that's not bad either. These are fine strats. These are going to have uses. You're going to enjoy using them as well. Like, they're pretty fun and good. But you compare that to Invasion Fleet. Sure, you can fight on death, but let's be real. The 5-up Feel No Pain on 1 or maybe even 2 units, because if you've got a Hive Tyrant, was just awesome. So you're not going to compete with that. And you compare that to Chaos Knights. They have a 4-up invuln versus shooting, and they have a 6-up Feel No Pain strat. They always have a 5-up invuln, in shooting anyway. So like, the defensive strats really are just not. They're good, but there's no defensive strat against shooting. And it was a shooting meta. Like, it just didn't feel great. Whereas a 5-up Feel No Pain, I don't care how you're hitting me, you can mortal me, but a 5-up Feel No Pain is going to save some of that. And then in terms of utility, which is really important for a big old monster army, we could walk through units. Like not even walls. I mean, we can walk through walls now, but back in the day, you could not walk through walls. Just other people's units or your units, and it's just a bit meh. You compare that to Invasion Fleet's utility strats. Overrun, the Endless Swarm one. That's amazing. Like those are strats. Those are stratagems that'll literally score you points or deny points. Like they're affecting the scoreline. They're really good. And then you look at Chaos Knights. Not only could they walk through walls, they could have 2 units walk through walls. Like, that's amazing. Like, that is what we wanted, right? So in reality, the strats were fine. Fine, I would say fine to good, right? The walkthrough unit stuff was rubbish, but the defensive and aggressive strats are good. It's just everyone else's was better, really. Let's look at the rule as well. So obviously I've mentioned it already, but +1 to hit if you're under full strength, and +1 to wound if you're under half strength. You are playing vanilla until that happens. That's horrible. Really not very good. I remember people talking about, well, I could explode my own monster for 1 mortal wound to everyone around him. Yeah, you have to lose a monster to do that. You have to like sacrifice 135 points for a psychophage. Do you remember those days? Insane. And you compare that to Invasion Fleet, it's like, oh, here's lethal hits for big things. Oh, did you not want that? Cool. What about sustained? Does that work for you? Like, yeah, sure. That's amazing. Thank you very much. And then the enhancements. I mean, the enhancements are a joke in this detachment, right? You've got one which is extra OC. I'm fine with that. I would call that a good 5 or 6 out of 10, right? And then the ones after, +1 to wound versus vehicle and monsters. Well, okay, fine. That's kind of okay. I mean, you wouldn't take it to a tournament because you might not even go into that. Maybe it's a meta-dependent one, right? If everyone's playing knights, maybe that works. Then, fight on death and a 3-up for 20 points. Are you actually joking me? Like, what is that? That's so bad. And that's really bad. But the one after that is even worse. 5-up Feel No Pain against psychic attacks. That's so bad. I don't think they realise sometimes how squishy a Hive Tyrant can be. Like, if that was just a 5-up Feel No Pain, that would be a good strat. That would be a good enhancement. I'd take that. But against psychic attacks? Oh, well, yeah. Luckily for me, everyone's playing T-Sons or something like that. I mean, come on. And it's a 5-up. If it was a 4-up, you could go, well, okay, it's a 4-up maybe. A 5-up? Come on, man. And you compare that to Invasion Fleet, right? You've got 3 bangers and something, somewhat of a dud, right? Perfectly adaptive, banger. Redeploy, banger, for the most part. It's a bit expensive. Adaptive biology, good if you've already given someone perfectly adapted and you really want to have 2 Hive Tyrants or something. 9-inch synapse. Okay, fine. So, yeah. So, overall, like, just not compelling stuff. So, to summarise the problems overall, there's no defense burst in shooting in a shooting meta. And then the combat came around, and it didn't really have an answer for that either. Because it couldn't, and that's the middle point, navigate around terrain very well. You just ended up car parked, all your movement 8, I think Chaos Knights have movement 10, right? Or move even higher for some of them. We were just hanging around with movement 8 on our Harrispexes and Maliceptors and things like that, just like doop, 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 trying to get through small gaps in terrain. Of course, we could shoot, that's fine, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that's one of the things we're good at. But yeah, it just was too difficult. And then on top of that, you think, well, maybe there's something to redeem it. No. You had to jump through a hoop just to get your detachment ability. And it was if your opponent was so kind, so pleasant, so lovely enough to actually damage you so that you could get +1 to hit. And +1 to hit's not a meme, that's a good thing. But come on, man, that's rough. And then there's no truly powerful plays. There's no enhancement, stratagem combos that we see in other detachments and other armies. It was just, for want of a better phrase, it was a dud. But there was changes are abound, guys. So what I've done is I've tier listed it because that is who I am as a person. It's just easy for me to visualize it like this. So did Pariah Nexus fix those problems? Well, I've put in the So Hot Right Now section, the S tier, the things that have made the biggest changes. Number 1, move through wall strat. Really good. Enables you to play the game and be a bit more dynamic in your play. It speeds up the detachment a little bit. Not too much though, because it is still slow as balls. And we'll talk about that in a minute. That also, by the way, opens up melee monsters. Melee monsters, I think, were just too difficult to play in this detachment unless the terrain was super up for it. I think the majority of terrain sets, you just couldn't do it. I know on UKTC it was a nightmare. GW terrain was not great for it. It was okay. But UKTC, which I played on quite a bit, yeah. +2 OC to monsters. That's pretty cool. That's really nice. It gives your opponent that decision point they talked about in the video, and I think that's a really cool game design thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, OC7 Tyrannofexes. Let's be having it. +1 strength and synapse. Awesome. I think monsters are the key beneficiaries of this, right? You've got Maliceptors, you've got Hive Tyrants, you've got the Swarm Lord, all now strength 10, okay, and that is a massive breakpoint. So we see a lot of that do really well, and we'll see them in the lists as well, I think. The Hive Tyrant free strat is really good. He can now put himself through a wall. That's pretty fun. It opens up just a bit more flexibility. You can tank shock, you can do all these things. I think as well, and we'll go into this in a sec, but this detachment, the way I've been playing it anyway, is you tend to save up CP for your big go turn, because your go turn is running through a wall, maybe tank shocking something, re-rolling your hits. Oh no, you didn't kill what you killed. -1 to hit me with the stratagem. That, 4 CP quite easily done there. So having the Hive Tyrant free strat is a really nice one as well. And having that flexibility to do it when you want is just a quality of life thing. You're not having to go, oh, well, hang on, do I need to do this because it's a battle tactic? Just nice. The Exocrine and Tyrannofex gun buffs are really fine. I think they're good. I think other people are probably higher on them than I am. The Tyrannofex gun buff is good, although the thing is, if you can put as much damage on it as you like, it tends to be a coin flip whether you kill what you're shooting, because it usually has an invul. So, okay, cool. The Exocrine at strength 9. Unfortunately, there's fewer rhinos in the meta now, but it's still decent, right? It's still nice. Fine. It can wound Tyrant Guard on 3s now. Yay. It's fine. Hive Tyrant Lethal Aura is very good, because if you're wanting to take a Hive Tyrant, you can absolutely do the full yeet that you might have done in Invasion Fleet, where you run up the side of the board with loads of Exocrines and shoot stuff. I still think that is a really fun way to play. And having the lethal hits is really nice as well with that. I think the Swarm Lord's now very playable. The Vect, I can't believe how powerful the Vect is. It's so good. And he's the chunkiest guy with Vect in the game. So let's lean into that. And then we've got tank shock changes. So the tank shock we have is okay, but everyone else has got bad. So ours got better in context, right? So I quite like it. And it doesn't matter which monster you throw in there. It's a Hive Tyrant, it's a Psychophage, something a bit rubbish. You can just chuck it in there, and it can do damage. It's pretty nice. Where I'm lukewarm is the Neurotyrant leading Zoanthropes. Now, we've seen some of these even in the WTC lists. I'm fine with it. Like, it's okay. By all means, like, live your dream if you want to use that. I'm not a big fan of it. In the testing I've done, I found it a bit mediocre. So, but go for it if that's what you want to go for. The Synapse. So, that is, so so that is the Shadow and the Warp Synapse change, right? So here's my thing with this. The Synapse changes is pretty cool. When I'm playing Synaptic Nexus and you throw your Synapse creatures forward and you have an aura and everyone's getting -1 leadership, you're like, yes, I'm winning. In Crusher Stampede, it has fewer Synapse monsters, generally speaking, than other detachments. Therefore, and Synapse units, you don't have Parasites in there, you don't have Neurolictors necessarily, So I think, broadly speaking, the Synapse is less important for this detachment. Which actually then, for my money, makes the Neurotyrant less important. Because if you're not getting the -1 from being in Synapse range from Shadows in the Warp, I kind of want the -2. So yeah, I'm -1 I'm not so hot on. It's still a 7. -2 though, like, that gets me excited. So for absolute sure, I'm focusing on Synapse and I'm focusing on Neurotyrants in Synaptic Nexus. But in this detachment, I'm not too fussed about it, just because of the sheer lack of Synapse. The overhanging models on terrain is great. Like, it's fine. It's just a nice quality of life thing. The terrain changes are really interesting. So, what Crusher Stampede's really good at, it's really good at shooting, annoyingly. You want it to be good at combat, but it's really good at shooting. Because if you've got Tyrannofexes that wipe a damage and then take some damage, then they're just running around hitting on 2s. Same for Exocrines, same for Maliceptors. Like, that's really fun. You can just run around, just brain laser stuff or blow things up. And so Crusher Stampede really loves a bit of shooting. I think, though, now the terrain's changed, so GW terrain and UKTC. I'm not sure about WTC, to be fair, but the more terrain means there's less shooting angles, which means actually that awesome ability kind of gets debuffed, right? It's not as good as it was, but it's easy to hide your melee monsters, and this is why I really like it. It's opened the door for melee monsters to get involved. So Haruspex, if you're that way inclined, all that kind of stuff is now easier to get up the board and safer to get up the board without it just getting his head blown off straight away. And then finally, all the Synapse, all the Vanguard stuff, like, that's, it doesn't obviously affect this. And then Broodlords and Parasites. I mean, a Parasite could be taken in this detachment if you're really into it. Like, I could see that being a thing, but there's not many synergies with the Synapse keyword in this detachment, so I wouldn't be too fussed with it, personally. So, in terms of the games I've played, and I've played quite a few, and I always advocate this: play loads of games and don't get pissed off when you lose. Just take the losses and learn from them. Like, it's super, super important. You don't learn anything from winning all your games. You just get a big old ego. So lose loads of games and see what you can change. So here's what I would change, or here's what I've seen, and then what I'm doing to fix it, or what I'm leaning towards. So, yes, we can put a unit through a wall, but we're still slow, man. We're so slow. So I am leaning heavily towards faster monsters, 9-inch to 12-inch movement. So everything from Flying Hive Tyrants to Tyrannofexes, Trigons, Morlocks, things like that are all really nice because they've got movement 10. Or movement, well, between 9 and 12. So that's really nice. The movement 8 is so annoying because it's just not quite, it doesn't feel when you're playing like it's quite enough. You can only put one unit through a wall a turn, so you have to really concentrate and focus on getting your go turn right, or threatening it significantly, right? Because then, if you put yourself in the position where you can just press go when you want, that's the dream. The problem is angling all these big old bodies in the right direction half the time. I've mentioned it already, but the lack of Synapse diminishes Shadow of the Warp, so the Neurotyrant value declines in my eyes. I'm trying to squeeze in lots of chaff for secondaries, because I do find that sometimes you just don't have enough. I was using Raveners. I've kind of gone off those a little bit now, but Lictors are fantastic for this, especially if you deploy right, and we'll maybe do a bit of video on how to deploy them, because the idea for me is making sure you can achieve as many secondaries as you can turn 1. So that's what lictors are being deployed, and where they get deployed for is just for that. Can they get somewhere and do containment at the same time as area denial or whatever, right? Like put them in the right places. I feel like this detachment is quite defensive, but hey, I said that about Invasion Fleet, and here's JP just literally marching Maliceptors up the board. I feel like, and this is the way I'm leaning with the playstyle, is I'm building like a really tough anvil for all these melee armies to hit and hopefully wash up against. Easier said than done, right? Because like you're looking at Blood Angels at the moment, like wow, they can just wipe whatever they touch. But you know, there's solutions we have in the book, and if you dig enough, you might find something. I'm hoping to have found something, but I'm not going to tell you what that is until I find out if it's good or not. I mean, you know, it's good fun to try and find these things out. The stat check of Crusher Stampede is very forgiving. Now, you might have heard me talk about how unforgiving Vanguard Onslaught is. It's really unforgiving. This actually is quite forgiving. Your Maliceptors and Psychophages and things like that with Invulns, you know, they just sometimes let you off with mistakes, which is great. But it also gives you the opportunity to really push hard against some opponents that do not have answers, and you'll be able to see it. And this is the big thing: is understanding the matchup rather than understanding like the understanding like a way of playing that you do every game. As long as you understand what your opponent's capable of, then you can really push hard, or you can play defensively, whatever you want to do. But it's very much like understanding that matchup really well. And then I've also found that Knights are still my kryptonite, so I'm reluctantly putting in a Rupture Effects into my list, because just like having one ready to try and like get, you know, do some damage to these Knights. I did have a game in Spain with it, and it went okay. I did kill Knights, but it took me too long, and I lost the game. I can't remember how many points, but I think it was a narrow loss. But it is what it is, right? Knights are still a nightmare for me, and I managed to pull them at every goddamn event. Hey ho. So here's the units I'm excited about. Everyone loves a unit tier list, right? I'm going to be really quick because I don't want this video to be too long. So what am I excited about? Old One Eye, rapid ingress threat, can hit on 2s when he's damaged, then he regens the wounds and goes back to like 5 OC. I love that about him. It's so much fun. Really good objective defender, or rapid ingress behind a wall, running through the wall into your opponent's deployment zone, cause havoc. Wonderful. Swarmlord's amazing. Already talked about it. Vector's awesome. I am loving him with Tyrant Guard. I don't know if it's good, but I know it's fun. So him and the Tyrant Guard just running through walls is a blast. If you don't like a Swarmlord, let me give you a Hive Tyrant, because you've got those lethals. You've got the Assault. Really nice. You got the free strat. I like, personally, I think that the Hive Tyrant's better, but I like the Flying Hive Tyrant's better because they're movement 12. Same thing as all One Eye. You can rapid ingress them. They can run through a wall. The -1 attack, melee attack, is really nice. And actually, I'm more excited about those in multiples, which is a lot of points. But hey, it's something to try, right? Okay, so they're kind of like a grouping, right? So that's your kind of HQs. I think Maliceptors and Tyrannofexes are kind of doing a similar role in this detachment. They're going to go and try and bully the mid-board and surprise your opponent at how durable they are. And they're great at that. I don't think you need like 2 of each, personally. I'm currently trying 1 of each. I was taking 2 Maliceptors. I've now stuck that Rupture Effects in. And we'll see how that goes. But both of them are big chunky boys with different defensive buffs, I suppose, or abilities. And they're great for just being in the middle of the board. And then a Trigon. So I really like Trigons in this detachment because it turns your opponent around. If you've got all these monsters and you're rapid ingressing things like all One Eye, you're going to be in front of your opponent all the time. You're playing like fair 40k, right? Your opponent just has to focus on moving forward. Don't need to worry about what's behind me. Oh no, there's a giant snake behind me. And if I hurt it, it hits on 2s. Like, Trigons are great. Also, nice little secondary scorers as well. You know, they're just great. I think they're fantastic. In the middle bit of like, well, okay, maybe. Number 1 is an Exocrine. Now, you might be saying, Dave, you're a crazy person. Exocrines are great. They are absolutely great. But I think with the new terrain changes, there's so much fewer shooting lanes. They're no longer 3 ofs. I actually don't think they're 2 ofs. I think they're a 1 of. and I still have one in my list, and I think they're absolutely they're good as a one-off, but the diminishing returns are real. Psychophages. So I hate psychophages. They don't do anything, but in this detachment they kind of do some interesting stuff. So they've obviously got the Feel No Pain all around them, which is great. I like them with my Tyrant Guard as well. So they've just got this nice little synergy of keeping things alive a little bit longer. They also have the 5 Feel No Pain with themselves, so I quite like chucking them one. I've got 2 in the list. I quite like chucking one onto a secondary point to start with, and having the other one back, kind of buffing everything else. But putting one onto like a secondary point. What am I talking about? An objective in the middle of the board. Putting one out there, maybe behind a bit of terrain if you can for the cover. It's really durable, and it's OC5 until it loses, or OC6 maybe, until it loses a wound. Like, it's really good. And they don't tend to die in a one shot. They tend to, you tend to get both levels of the buff, the +1 to hit and the +1 to wound. The flamer with +1 to wound is kind of cool. Okay, right? I said it. It's kind of cool as long as you don't roll a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4. Then it's kind of cool. Screamer Killers. I do love Screamer Killers. They're still too expensive, really. Like, they just die too quick, which is a shame. I do think there's worlds where you can run them through walls and they're great as well, but I just think like all One Eye's doing it better. Hive Tyrants are offering way more. Like, you know, I just don't really fancy them. Carnifexes themselves, I don't mind Carnifexes themselves. They're quite interesting. I know our boy JP is really into all One Eye and 2 Carnifexes in this detachment. I'm not as hot on that, although I would say if I had all the games in the world, it would be something I want to try pretty soon to see how it was. Haruspex it's just a less good old One Eye for my money. I'd rather spend the 15 points more and have all One Eye, realistically. Neurotyrant, I've already spoken about it. The Norn, I'm just not a fan of Norn. I feel like it's a lot of eggs in one bucket. One bucket. Yeah, I carry all my eggs around in a bucket, just so you know. It's fine. The Norns are fine. You are either into them or you're not. I'm really not into them. I've had one since the start of the edition. It's still unbuilt underneath my desk. Then we've got the other ones. So a Tervigan, again, something I wouldn't mind trying is a Tervigan in this detachment with a bunch of Termagants, just to kind of clog up the front and then loads of shooting behind it. I think that would be quite an interesting list, if the terrain was appropriate. Morlocks, I know they're in the WTC list. I don't know why. I think maybe the number of attacks is maybe appealing there, but for me, the option, these are really good in Synaptic Nexus. Like, I take 3 of them in Synaptic Nexus. I'd take 2 of them in Vanguard Onslaught. I take 0 of them in Crusher Stampede, personally. But hey, I can't wait to find out how the guys use them. Then the drop pod, yeah, sure, okay. If there was something good to put in it, great. It has what, OC5 as well? Yeah, sure. A Toxicrin, I'm not going to be the guy to try the Toxicrin. Someone else can try it, and then I will comment on after that. Sporicist has OC2 in this detachment. That's kind of funny, but no. And then Birds, yeah, you can't see it because my head. Don't worry, you're not missing out on anything. All right, so that's part 1. That's my thinking of the detachment, guys. I hope either you've learned something or I've riled up some anger within you and you want to comment below and tell me I'm an idiot. I would love to hear your thoughts on this detachment and how you think it's going to pan out. I think it's going to be the 4th player detachment. I think it's going to outperform its player base. So it'll be the 4th played. I think it might be the 3rd or maybe 2nd highest win rate. What else would I predict for it? Yeah, I think it's going to do okay at WTC as well. I think it's interestingly placed for sure. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. Of course, part 2 will come as soon as the stat check is updated, and I'll give you all the boring data bar graphs that you can handle around Crusher Stampede. But for now, if you need any more Crusher Stampede content, go and watch the video. I played a game online against a really good player, and it was a really good game. So go and have a look at that. Wow. That is the end of the show, guys. Thank you for watching. Again, please like and subscribe. We'd love it when that happens. And we'll catch you on the next one. Peace out. Oh, wow, I'm so not cool.